The room is filled with the cruel whispers of the elite. Kenji's new partner, a wealthy heiress, laughs openly. They think Imabong Vivian is leaving with nothing but the cardboard box at her feet. Kenji, go back to the shadows, Vivian. You never belonged in this light. The heavy mahogany doors don't just open, they are thrown back by two stone-faced guards. Ji-hoon walks in, his presence radiating a terrifying intensity. He stops at the head of the table, his dark eyes locking onto Imabong. Ji-hoon, I hear there's a vacancy for a woman who knows every dirty secret this company is hiding. A woman who built this empire while her husband took the credit. Ji-hoon reaches down and picks up Imabong's cardboard box himself, a shocking act of service from a man of his status. Ji-hoon, keep your severance, Kenji. Imabong Vivian isn't leaving with a check. She's leaving with the man who's going to help her take everything you own. Vivian, let's go.
Welcome to Afro-Korean Mafia love thrillers, the home of dark romance, brutal betrayals, forbidden passion, and revenge that cuts deep. Here, we explore deep, emotional, and thrilling love stories between African women and Korean men, stories filled with passion, culture clash, forbidden love, secrets, sacrifice, and destiny. From tender romance to intense drama, from heartbreak to healing, every story pulls you into a world where love crosses borders and challenges expectations. If you love stories where powerful men fall for the one woman they were never supposed to love, and vice versa, where enemies become lovers, and where every choice has a deadly consequence, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to this thrilling channel, like and share this video, because every week we bring you heart-pounding mafia love stories that will keep you hooked till the very last word. Now sit back, because this story is about to blow your mind. Now, let's get back to our story.
The air in the boardroom was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the stifling weight of 500 silent judgments. Imabong Vivian stood at the head of the table, her fingers trembling as she clutched the edge of the mahogany. She had been married to Kenji for 7 years, 7 years of being his silent backbone, his strategist, and his secretary, only to be discarded the moment the ink on his latest billion-dollar merger was dry. "You're nothing without my name, Imabong," Kenji sneered, his cowardice hidden behind a $5,000 suit. "I gave you a life. Now I'm taking it back." The sea of pitying faces around the table made her skin crawl. But as she turned to pick up her box, the elevators in the private lobby chimed. The slow, deliberate footsteps of Ji-hoon echoed through the floor. He entered like a predator, the dragon tattoo on his neck a warning to everyone in the room. He stopped directly in front of Imabong, his voice low and dangerous. "If this man wants to throw away the brains behind his operation," Ji-hoon said, his gaze sweeping the terrified board members, "then he just paved the way for his own destruction. Imabong Vivian, I've been waiting for a partner with your specific talents." He didn't offer a tissue for the single tear on her cheek. He offered a seat in the most powerful car in the city. "You wanted to belong, Vivian? Stop trying to fit into a house that hates you. Come with me, and I will give you a kingdom that fears you." The transition from the boardroom to Ji-hoon's world is a shift from cold corporate betrayal to the warm, dangerous hum of absolute power. As Imabong Vivian leaves behind the man who called her a pity secretary, she enters a space where her intelligence is a currency and her heritage is her strength. The matte black elevator ascended in a silence so thick Imabong could hear her own heart hammering against her ribs. Beside her, Ji-hoon stood like a statue, his intensity filling the small space. He didn't look at her, but she could see the reflection of his dragon tattoo in the polished chrome doors, a reminder that she was no longer in the world of spreadsheets and coffee runs. When the doors slid open, they revealed a fortress of glass and steel that made Kenji's office look like a toy set. This was the nerve center of the city's shadows. "The board sees a secretary," Ji-hoon said, his voice low and dangerous as he led her toward a desk carved from a single slab of obsidian. "I see the woman who kept Kenji's tax records, his offshore contacts, and his mistress's hush-money receipts. You weren't his secretary, Vivian. You were his keeper. And now you're my architect." He didn't hand her a typewriter. He handed her a black and gold tablet that displayed a real-time map of the city's shipping docks. "Kenji thinks he's safe because he has the titles," Ji-hoon whispered, his scarred knuckles grazing the obsidian. "But titles can be stripped. Power, however, power is built. Welcome to the construction site." The transformation took place in a private wing of the estate, where the air smelled of sandalwood and expensive leather. Imabong stood before a three-way mirror, watching as a team of world-class stylists, people who usually only served the wives of presidents, worked in silence. The modest cardigans and charcoal blazers she had worn to fit in at Kenji's firm were gone, tossed into a literal incinerator. In their place came the black silk and tailored structure of a woman who commanded fleets. Her hair, which Kenji had always pressured her to straighten, was unraveled and sculpted into a sleek, defiant crown of curls that added an inch to her height. When Ji-hoon entered the room, the conversation died. He leaned against the doorframe, his dark eyes locking onto hers through the mirror. He walked toward her, his scarred knuckles reaching out to adjust the collar of her new $15,000 power suit. "Kenji wanted you to be invisible so he could shine," Ji-hoon whispered, his voice low and dangerous near her ear. "But I don't hire shadows. I hire architects. You aren't just filing papers anymore, Vivian. You're drawing the blueprints for Kenji's funeral." He handed her a heavy, gold-encased phone, a direct line to his most elite stone-faced guards and his global intelligence network. For the first time, Imabong didn't feel like she was trying to belong in someone else's world. She felt like she was building her own. The war room was silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of Ji-hoon's fingers against the obsidian table. On the screens behind him, the blue light of financial data flickered, illuminating the dragon tattoo on his neck. Imabong Vivian stood at the center of the room, her new black silk suit catching the light as she prepared to play her most dangerous card. "Revenge is a messy business, Vivian," Ji-hoon said, his voice low and dangerous as he watched her. "But a hostile takeover? That is an art form. Tell me, how do we cut the throat of Kenji's empire without spilling a drop of our own blood?" Imabong didn't hesitate. She swiped a finger across her tablet, and the massive wall of monitors shifted to show a complex web of shell companies. "Kenji isn't just a CEO, he's a gambler," Imabong stated, her voice projecting with a confident queen authority. "For years, I watched him funnel corporate funds into special purpose vehicles to hide the losses from his failed tech investments. He called it strategic restructuring. I call it embezzlement." She zoomed in on a specific signature, a forgery of her own name that Kenji had used during their marriage to bypass board approval. The vulnerability she had felt in the boardroom was now a cold, hard flame. "I kept the original timestamps. If we leak this to the major creditors in the Busan shipping sector, they'll pull their lines of credit by Friday. His stock will plummet, and he'll be forced to sell his controlling shares just to avoid a prison cell." Ji-hoon stood up, moving into her space with an intense predatory grace. He looked at the data, then at her. "And the price for this, Vivian? My family council will want to know why I'm risking a war for you." "The price is simple," Imabong replied, looking him dead in the eye. "I want his seat. I want the board to see the pity secretary sign the papers that strip him of everything." Ji-hoon smiled, a rare, sharp expression that promised violence. "Deal. From this moment, we are no longer just allies. We are a powerful partnership." As they left the room, Ji-hoon stopped her at the elevator. "One more thing, Vivian. Kenji is going to realize it's you. He's going to come crawling back, begging for mercy or threatening your life. Which one are you ready for?" Imabong checked the gold-encased phone in her hand. "Let him come. I've spent 7 years being his shadow. It's time he learns how cold it gets when the sun goes out." The air at the Busan docks was thick with the smell of brine and industrial diesel. Rain slicked the asphalt, reflecting the red and blue flashing lights of the shipping cranes. Imabong stood on the elevated gantry, her black silk trench coat billowing in the wind. Beside her, Ji-hoon watched the perimeter, his stone-faced guards blending into the shadows of the shipping containers. 3 minutes until the manifest is signed, Imabong said, checking her gold-encased phone. This shipment contains the specialized tech components Kenji needs to fulfill his contract with the ministry. If he loses this, he loses his last shred of credibility. Down on the pier, Kenji's foreman was frantically arguing with a customs official, a man who had been re-educated by Ji-hoon's influence earlier that evening. The pity secretary knew exactly which inspector to call, Ji-hoon remarked, his voice low and dangerous as he leaned against the railing. He turned to her, the dragon tattoo on his neck glowing under the yellow dock lights. "You didn't just find a leak, Vivian, you created a flood." With a single tap on her screen, Imabong authorized the seizure. The customs official raised a hand, and a fleet of black armored trucks swerved into the dock, blocking Kenji's trucks. "The shipment is being diverted to our warehouse," Imabong stated, her voice projecting with a confident queen intensity. "Tell Kenji if he wants his components back, he can come to the board meeting on Monday. I'll be sitting in his chair." Ji-hoon looked at her, a smirk playing on his lips. "You're getting a taste for this, aren't you?" Imabong didn't smile. She just watched as the trucks were hauled away. "I'm just finishing the job he started when he fired me. I'm taking out the trash." The library's hidden door hummed as it slid open, leading not to more monitors, but to a stone staircase that descended into the belly of the estate. The air grew cooler, smelling of old parchment and cold iron. Ji-hoon led the way, his shadow stretching long against the rough-hewn walls. "Kenji's world was built on contracts that can be shredded," Ji-hoon said, his voice low and dangerous, echoing in the stairwell. "My world is built on a complex code of blood and silence. Here, a pity secretary survives by being invisible, but a queen thrives by being the person everyone is afraid to whisper about." He stopped in a vaulted chamber where the walls were lined with ancient maps of the city's underbelly. He turned to her, and for the first time, he unbuttoned the top of his silk shirt, revealing the full extent of the dragon tattoo, not just a mark, but a map of his lineage. "Every scale on this dragon represents a debt or a loyalty," he explained, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a raw intensity. "The first rule of the Empire, Vivian, we never strike out of anger, we strike out of necessity. The second rule, anyone who isn't an asset is a liability." He took her hand, his scarred knuckles warm against her skin. "I'm giving you the keys to my intelligence network. You'll see the cheating deals of the city's elite, the skeletons in their closets. But once you know these secrets, you can never go back to being just Imabong Vivian from the HR files. You become a ghost in the machine." Imabong looked at the maps, then back at the man who had claimed her. She didn't feel fear, she felt a surge of power and loyalty. "I've been a ghost my whole life, Ji-hoon. I'm tired of haunting. I'm ready to rule." Ji-hoon handed her a small encrypted drive. On this is the location of Kenji's private server. He thinks it's off-grid. Use your waitress instincts, Vivian. Find the one thing he's most afraid of the world seeing. Imabong took the drive, her fingers brushing his. He's afraid of being poor, Ji-hoon. I'm going to make sure he's also afraid of being forgotten. The move to bankrupt Kenji's spirit was underway, but the elite social circle wasn't going down without a fight. Emmy, the heiress Kenji had chosen to replace Imabong Vivian, decided to take matters into her own manipulating hands. The gala at the Blue Moon Lounge was a shark tank of high society vultures. Imabong Vivian stood on the mezzanine, a vision in black silk and emeralds, watching the room with the intensity of a hawk. Beside her, Ji-hoon sipped a whiskey, his predatory protection radiating like a physical heat. "She's moving," Ji-hoon whispered, his voice low and dangerous. Down on the floor, Emmy, wearing a dress designed to be more seductive than sophisticated, approached the bar where Ji-hoon's most loyal capos stood. Seeing an opening when Ji-hoon stepped away for a moment, she intercepted him near the terrace. "Ji-hoon," Emmy purred, her eyes bright with rehearsed tears. "You're a man of taste. Why are you parading a pitty black secretary around? It's bad for business. Kenji is a fool, but I have the assets and the lineage you actually need." She leaned in, her hand reaching for the dragon tattoo on his neck. "Partner with me, and we can forget Vivian ever existed." Ji-hoon didn't flinch. He didn't even catch her hand. He simply looked over Emmy's shoulder. "Vivian," Ji-hoon called, his voice cutting through the lounge music. "The trash is trying to talk. Should I handle it, or do you want to show her how we treat liabilities?" Imabong Vivian stepped out of the shadows, her confident queen presence making Emmy look like a desperate child. Imabong didn't raise her voice. She simply held up her tablet, which displayed a live feed of Emmy's family's bank accounts Imabong had just finished observing using Ji-hoon's codes. "Emmy, dear," Imabong said, her dark eyes locking onto hers with chilling calm. "You talk about lineage, but your father's firm just defaulted on its Busan loans. By tomorrow morning, you won't have a dowry, you'll have a debt. And in this world, debt is a death sentence." Emmy's face twisted with cowardice as she realized she'd walked into a seduction trap laid by a woman 10 steps ahead of her. "Get out," Ji-hoon growled, his scarred knuckles white as he gripped his glass. "My wife is right. You're a boring actress, and I only invest in assets that grow." As Emmy fled the lounge in tears, the room fell into a stunned silence. Imabong turned back to Ji-hoon, smoothing her silk gown. "You handled that with intensity," Ji-hoon remarked, a look of genuine secret respect in his eyes. "I spent 7 years serving people like her," Imabong replied. "I know exactly where their pride breaks. Now, let's finish the financial scandal. It's time for Kenji's final audit." The seduction trap had been a mere distraction. Now, Imabong Vivian was ready to deliver the killing blow to Kenji's corporate legacy. The secrets she had once protected out of marital loyalty were about to become the nails in his coffin. The master suite of the estate was quiet, save for the hum of the high-security servers. Imabong Vivian sat at a sleek obsidian desk, her face illuminated by the cold blue light of 3 monitors. She wasn't wearing the pitty secretary charcoal blazer. She was draped in a black silk robe, her defiant crown of curls silhouetted against the glowing data. Ji-hoon stood behind her, his scarred knuckles resting on the back of her chair. He watched with a predatory protection as she navigated the labyrinth of Kenji's private offshore accounts. "He was sloppy, Ji-hoon," Imabong whispered, her voice no longer trembling. He thought because I was just a secretary, I didn't understand the financial scandal he was brewing. He used my digital signature to authorize a $20 million bribe to the Busan Port Authority. She paused, her finger hovering over the send key. He didn't realize I logged every IP address and kept the original timestamps, proving he forged my consent after I filed for divorce. Ji-hoon leaned down, the dragon tattoo on his neck coming into her line of sight. If you click that, Vivian, there is no going back. His family name will be a slur by morning. He'll lose the company, the penthouse, and his freedom. Imabong looked at the screen, then at the man who had given her the power and loyalty to strike back. He took my dignity in front of the board. I'm just returning the favor. With a single decisive click, she sent the encrypted files to the National Tax Service and the city's top 3 news bureaus. The pity secretary had just become the ultimate whistleblower. As they walked back to the car, Imabong's personal phone, the one she hadn't yet changed, began to vibrate. The caller ID showed Kenji. Ji-hoon noticed the screen. "Are you going to answer?" Imabong looked at the phone, then let it drop into a puddle on the asphalt. She stepped over it without a second glance. The time for talking ended at the church. Now we just act. The following Monday, the pressure of the first strike had reached a boiling point. The news was already buzzing with rumors of Kenji's missing shipment and the sudden financial scandal rocking his stock price. He was desperate, and like a wounded animal, he went to the one place he thought he still had a claim. The security monitors in Ji-hoon's library flickered, showing a silver sedan screeching to a halt at the perimeter gates. Kenji stumbled out, his expensive suit wrinkled and his cowardice masked by a frantic, sweating rage. He was shouting Imabong's name, demanding to speak to his secretary about the mistake at the docks. "He actually thinks he can order you around in my house," Ji-hoon said, his voice low and dangerous as he watched the screen. He turned to Imabong Vivian, who was sitting in a high-backed velvet chair, sipping a dark tea. "Should I have the guards remove him, or do you want to show him the new hierarchy?" "Let him in," Imabong replied, her voice no longer trembling, but filled with a cold, confident queen authority. "He needs to see what a real empire looks like." When the doors to the library swung open, Kenji burst in, his mouth open to bark an order. But he froze. The pity black secretary he had discarded was gone. In her place sat a woman draped in black silk, her hair a defiant crown, framed by the high-tech monitors and the stone-faced guards of a mafia king. "Imabong, what have you done?" Kenji stammered, his eyes darting to Ji-hoon, who stood in the shadows like a predator. "Tell this man to release it. I'll give you your job back. I'll even increase your severance." Imabong set her cup down with a soft, final clink. She stood up, moving toward him with an intensity that made him stumble back. "You still don't get it, Kenji," she whispered, her dark eyes locking onto his. "I didn't steal your shipment. I reclaimed the interest on the 7 years of my life you stole. You aren't here to negotiate. You're here to realize that the pity black secretary is now the only person who can keep you out of prison." Ji-hoon stepped forward, his scarred knuckles resting on Imabong's shoulder in a display of predatory protection. "The lady is being kind," Ji-hoon growled. "I would have just buried you. Get out of our sight before I change my mind." As the guards dragged a pleading, broken Kenji away, the seduction game he tried to play, relying on their past marriage of convenience, failed completely. Imabong Vivian was no longer his wife. She was his executioner. Within minutes, the golden-cased phone on the desk began to buzz. Alerts from the stock market showed Kenji's company shares in a free fall, dropping 15% in the first 10 minutes of pre-market trading. "It started," Imabong said, her voice steady. Ji-hoon pulled her up from the chair and into his arms. The debt is paid, Vivian. But remember, a wounded animal is most dangerous when it has nothing left to lose. Kenji will come for you one last time, and this time he won't be bringing divorce papers. The financial scandal had gutted Kenji's company, but as Ji-hoon warned, a man who has lost his reputation often forgets his fear. The final confrontation was moved to a neutral, safe zone, a high-altitude glass boardroom in the city's financial district for the final liquidation of assets. The atmosphere was electric with intensity. Imabong Vivian walked into the room, her blood and diamonds aesthetic in full effect, a crimson power suit and a diamond choker that felt like a warrior's gorget. Beside her, Ji-hoon moved with a predatory protection, his stone-faced guards fanning out to secure the perimeter. Kenji was already there, looking like a ghost of the man he used to be. But he wasn't alone. He had hired ruthless mercenaries, men who didn't care about corporate law, only the debt Kenji had promised to pay with his last remaining offshore accounts. "You think you won, Imabong?" Kenji hissed, his voice cracking with cowardice and rage. "You're just a secretary who got lucky with a mafia thug." As the lawyers began to lay out the papers, Imabong's waitress instincts, the ability to scan a room and notice the smallest detail, flashed a red alert. She noticed the intensity in the gaze of one of the catering staff, a man whose hand was hovering too close to a weapon concealed under a serving towel. "Ji-hoon, down!" she screamed, her voice no longer trembling. She didn't wait. She lunged across the table, shoving Ji-hoon aside, just as the suppressed pop of a pistol shattered the glass window behind them. Chaos erupted. The board members scrambled for cover under the mahogany table. Min Jun's guards engaged the mercenaries, but Imabong was already moving. She knew this building. She had organized the floor plans for Kenji years ago. She grabbed a heavy glass award from the sideboard and threw it with lethal precision at the assassin's head, distracting him long enough for Ji-hoon to recover. Ji-hoon was on his feet in a second, his scarred knuckles white as he disarmed the shooter. He didn't look at the threat. He looked at Imabong, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a mixture of shock and profound loyalty. "You saved me," he murmured, the dragon tattoo on his neck pulsing with adrenaline. Imabong smoothed her crimson suit, her breathing steady. "I told you, Ji-hoon, we are a partnership, and I don't let anyone touch my assets." Ji-hoon stood up and walked over to the cowering Kenji. He didn't use a gun. He simply handed him the fountain pen. "My wife just saved my life," Ji-hoon growled, his voice low and dangerous, "which means she's in a very bad mood. Sign the papers, Kenji. Sign them, or I'll let her decide what happens to you next." Kenji, trembling, reached for the pen. The Queen's gambit was nearly complete. The moment of absolute reckoning had arrived. Imabong Vivian was no longer the woman who had been discarded. She was the woman who had returned to claim the entire building. The same boardroom that had witnessed her social death was now silent as a tomb. The air was thick with the scent of fear and expensive cologne. The sea of pitying faces had turned into a row of trembling ghosts. The board members sat in the same chairs, but their eyes were glued to the elevator doors. When the doors opened, Imabong Vivian didn't just walk in, she commanded the space. She wore a bespoke ivory suit, the color of the wedding dress Kenji had stained with betrayal, but it was structured like armor. Ji-hoon walked 2 paces behind her, a ruthless shadow of predatory protection, letting everyone know that to challenge her was to invite the underworld to their doorstep. Imabong took the seat at the head of the table, Kenji's chair. She placed her gold-encased phone on the mahogany surface with a deliberate thud. 7 months ago, you sat here and laughed while I was fired for being a pity secretary, Imabong began, her voice no longer trembling, but echoing with chilling respect. Today, I'm here to announce a change in leadership. She swiped her tablet, and the giant screens behind her displayed the legal reality, a 51% majority stake in the company, transferred from Kenji's frozen assets to her name. Kenji sat in the corner, flanked by stone-faced guards, his face a mask of cowardice as he watched his empire vanish. "I'm firing the entire board," she stated, her dark eyes locking onto the men who mocked her. "Effective immediately. You've been living off the labor of the help for too long. Security will escort you out. Leave your badges. Keep your shame." One by one, the elite socialites were marched out. As the room cleared, only Imabong and Ji-hoon remained. The Queen's gambit was complete. Kenji was the last to be led to the door. He stopped and looked back at Imabong, his voice a pathetic whimper. "Imabong, Vivian, we were family once." Imabong didn't even look up from her tablet. "No, Kenji. We were a financial scandal that I finally managed to audit. Goodbye." Ji-hoon leaned down and whispered in her ear, "You handled that with more intensity than I ever could have. Are you ready for the final rule?" The chaos of the corporate war had finally settled, leaving a silence that wasn't heavy or cruel, but expectant. Imabong Vivian had dismantled a dynasty, and in its place she had built something far more resilient. The rooftop of Ji-hoon's estate overlooked the sprawling city, a sea of neon lights that now felt like a map of their shared territory. The gold light of the setting sun hit the glass walls, casting long shadows. Imabong Vivian stood at the railing, her ivory suit replaced by a flowing gown of deep midnight blue. She wasn't the pity secretary or the contract partner anymore. She was simply herself. Ji-hoon approached her, his slow, deliberate footsteps echoing on the stone terrace. He didn't come as a predator this time, but as a man who had found his equal. He stood beside her, the dragon tattoo on his neck glowing in the twilight. "The board is gone. Kenji is in a cell awaiting trial, and the city knows your name, Vivian." His voice low and dangerous, but filled with a rare, genuine warmth. He reached into his pocket and produced a ring, not a modest diamond like the one Kenji had discarded, but a raw, black diamond set in heavy platinum. "I told you I needed a partner to help me burn this city down," he murmured, his scarred knuckles brushing against her hand. "But I realized I don't want to rule it alone. Our marriage of convenience served its purpose. Now I'm asking for something real." Imabong looked at the ring, then at the man who had seen her vulnerability and turned it into power and loyalty. She realized that belonging didn't mean fitting into someone else's house. It meant building a throne with someone who respected your scars as much as your strength. "I spent my life serving people who didn't see me, Ji-hoon," she whispered, her voice no longer trembling. She took the ring and slid it onto her finger. "I think it's time they finally look up." As they stood together overlooking the kingdom they had claimed, the stakes were finally settled. They weren't just a mafia boss and his strategist, they were the new architects of the city.